Have you ever wondered how much weight you're carrying that actually doesn't serve you at all? Throughout life, we accumulate more than we need, from objects and commitments to thoughts and people. Without realizing it, that weight makes it harder to move forward, and instead of driving us, it holds us back. Today, I want to share with you how the simple act of letting go of what's unnecessary can be the most liberating change you could ever experience. To illustrate, let me tell you the story of a man named Tomas, an avid traveler who once decided to cross the desert. Known for his passion for discovering new places, Tomas had spent years collecting souvenirs from each place he visited: small stones, keychains, postcards, and countless trinkets. When it came time to cross the desert, he packed everything, convinced that each item would bring him luck on his adventure. At first, everything went well. He walked under the sun, enjoying the landscape and solitude. But as he went on, the weight of his backpack became increasingly unbearable. What once seemed necessary now slowed him down. With each step, he felt his legs give way a little more under the weight of his own memories. He realized that if he wanted to reach the other side of the desert, he had to leave something behind. One by one, Tomas began to remove items from his backpack that he found less useful. First went the stones, then the keychains. With each item he let drop into the sand, he felt lighter, freer. However, when he reached the postcards, he hesitated. These postcards held important memories, images of people and places he had loved. It hurt to leave them behind, but he understood that if he didn't, he might never finish his journey. Finally, with a deep sigh, he left the postcards on the ground and kept walking. With each step, his backpack grew lighter, and he too felt freer. By the time he reached the other side of the desert, he had left behind much more than simple objects. He had left behind a part of himself he no longer needed. From that moment on, each step he took was a reminder that sometimes letting go is the bravest act of all. The story of Tomas teaches us that often what we think defines or gives us security is actually what prevents us from moving forward. Like Tomas, you also carry a backpack full of things you might no longer need, others' expectations, relationships that add no value, habits that drain you. In Stoicism, there is a fundamental principle, the wisdom of knowing when to let go. And this is where our video comes in today. I'll show you the 10 things you should silently remove from your life. You don't need to announce it to the world or make a show of it. It's a personal process, a silent yet powerful release. Stay until the end, because the last point will surprise you and offer a new perspective on what it means to live an authentic and free life. So, if you're ready to embark on this journey of self-liberation, let's get started. 1. Have you ever wondered how many of your decisions have been shaped more by the fear of others' opinions than by your own desires? It's amazing how that fear can seep under your skin, immobilizing you, turning each step into a balancing act between what you want and what you think others expect from you. You become an actor on a stage where it feels like everyone is watching. But here's the secret. People are usually too busy dealing with their own insecurities to focus on you. And yet, there's that fear whispering in your ear every time you try something new, reminding you that judgment could be right around the corner. Most of us become experts at adapting to our surroundings, altering ourselves to fit social molds. We adjust our appearance, words, and even our dreams to avoid the "what will they say?" It's ironic. We fear criticism so much that we forget to live our lives. It's as if each of us carries an internal compass out of alignment, one that points south to societal dictates instead of north to our own desires. This need to please leads us to wear masks, to shift our personality depending on the group we're with, to the point where the true self is buried under layers of fake smiles and others' opinions. The worst part is that this fear disguises itself as prudence. It tells us, it's not the right time, or I'm not good enough. It convinces us it's better to wait, that someday we'll be brave or capable enough to pursue our dreams. But that perfect day never comes, and meanwhile, our dreams sit tucked away, relegated to a dark and dusty corner of our mind, waiting for an opportunity that never arrives. To overcome this fear, we need to delve into Stoic philosophy. The Stoics teach us that although we can't control what others think of us, we do have power over how we respond to their opinions. This idea, seemingly simple, is immensely liberating. It involves a constant exercise of introspection and courage, training ourselves to live in harmony with our values rather than others' expectations. Imagine someone who has followed the path others laid out for him all his life, studying the right career, working in the appropriate place, doing everything he was supposed to do. Now, at some point in his life, he realizes he doesn't recognize himself. He has spent so many years trying to fit in that he's lost connection with what truly matters to him. His story is the story of many of us. Every time we choose to live by others' expectations, we give up a piece of our authenticity, a small fragment of our true essence. It's a kind of slow, quiet death, one we can only avoid if we have the courage to be true to who we are. A good first step to combat this fear is to start silently removing what doesn't add value to our lives, things that only exist to please others. Ask yourself, what things do you do just because you're afraid of others' judgment? What decisions did you make based on what you thought others expected of you? Perhaps it's a career that doesn't fulfill you, a relationship you maintain to avoid disappointing someone, or an image you project on social media because you fear what people will think if you show your true self. Start with small decisions. Say no to plans you don't actually feel like doing, or try something you've always wanted to do but didn't because of the "what will they say?" Each small action you take to live by your own values is a step toward your freedom. I won't lie to you, it won't be easy. There will be days when the weight of others' judgment feels unbearable. In those moments, remind yourself that every time you choose to live according to others' expectations, you give up a piece of yourself. It's also essential to remember what Carl Jung said: freedom begins the moment you stop worrying about what others think of you. This might sound like a nice phrase, but it's a profound truth. True freedom arises the instant you stop giving power to others' opinions and start trusting your own judgment. Letting go of worrying about what they'll say doesn't mean you don't care about anything or listen to anyone. It means you've decided to prioritize what you think, your values and desires. It's about learning to live with authenticity, being true to who you are instead of what others want you to be. The process isn't quick or easy, but with each step you take in this direction, you'll gain a new understanding of yourself and a confidence that can't be bought or faked. This path toward authenticity doesn't need fanfare or grand announcements. Simply start letting go, silently, of what you don't need. Sometimes, the deepest transformations happen quietly and discreetly. And the more you work on living by your own compass, the less you'll depend on others' opinions. In the end, the only person you're accountable to is yourself. So, if you're ready to start this journey of liberation, begin saying goodbye to what binds you and make way for the version of yourself you truly want to be. 2. Have you ever clung to people as if your life depended on them, even when, little by little, they are draining you? It's like trying to keep a dead plant in the garden, hoping it will bloom again. This selective blindness we develop towards certain people is dangerous. We get used to their presence, holding on, even though each encounter leaves us empty, drained, even hurt. But why do we insist on keeping these relationships? Why do we allow toxic connections to cling to us as if breaking them would be an act of betrayal? You've probably heard the saying, "There's none so blind as those who will not see." We love applying it to others, but rarely do we use it to question ourselves. Some relationships, like a dark water current, slowly pull us to a place where we forget our own light, our peace. And I'm not just talking about romantic relationships. Toxic bonds can exist anywhere, in your friend group, at work, or even sometimes in the family. We've been taught to tolerate them, to be strong, as if setting boundaries or cutting ties was selfish or insensitive. But here's where the Stoics have something to teach us. They believed that we should only be concerned with what we can control, and this includes our relationships. We can't control others' behavior, but we can decide whether or not we want them to be part of our lives. In the end, it's not about drama or confrontation. Sometimes letting go in silence without fanfare or explanations is the greatest act of self-love. Imagine your life as a garden. Every person is a plant you've watered, cared for, and watched grow. Some plants bloom, stay strong, and bring life every time you see them. But others, no matter how much you care for them, seem to wither. The wise choice isn't to keep those plants out of pity or habit, but to let them go, to recognize that their cycle in your life has ended. Without resentment, simply letting the garden cleanse itself of what no longer brings beauty or peace. Often you realize that certain people, although not necessarily bad, profoundly affect you. Maybe you've noticed that after spending time with someone, you feel exhausted, as if every conversation were an emotional marathon. This is a key sign. Relationships that drain us often have a heavy energy that doesn't align with ours. It's not about judging anyone, but about recognizing which connections enrich your life and which ones darken it. Just as we take care of our physical health, we must also care for our emotional health. Instead of letting these bonds wear us down until we feel trapped, Stoicism offers us a strategy: silence. It's not a vengeful or resentful silence, but one that allows peace. Gradually, you reduce contact, stop being constantly available, and allow yourself to create the necessary distance without resentment. Over time, you'll notice that the space once occupied by people who didn't add anything positive becomes a place where you can flourish. But how do you know if you're truly in a toxic relationship? The answer lies in the signs. Observe your emotions before and after each interaction. If getting a message or call from someone makes you feel a knot in your stomach, or if the thought of seeing them fills you with anxiety or fatigue, there's a clue. If after spending time together you feel more exhausted than after a full week of work, or if you always feel like you're giving while they only take, you might need to reassess that relationship. When you realize this, you can begin the process of distancing. Remember that you don't need to make a big announcement. It's not about drama or arguments. You simply give yourself permission to let go. Like the gardener who stops watering a wilting plant, you make the conscious decision not to feed that bond anymore. Not out of cruelty, but because you understand that your well-being must be a priority. Along the way, you may feel guilt. Society often tells us to be compassionate and understanding no matter the circumstances. But true compassion starts with ourselves. Letting go of someone who hurts or drains us isn't an act of malice. It's an act of respect for ourselves. And paradoxically, this self-respect ends up benefiting everyone. When we free ourselves from emotional burdens, we have more energy to invest in relationships that truly make us happy. For the Stoics, detachment is a fundamental skill. They remind us that some people come into our lives for a time, and then our paths diverge. This is natural and shouldn't be a cause for suffering. Every time you choose to release something that no longer serves you, you're freeing up space where better things can enter. New people, new experiences, or simply more peace and tranquility. Carl Jung once said, "Who looks outside, dreams. Who looks inside, awakens." In this context, Looking inside means being honest with yourself, listening to your intuition, and letting that inner voice guide you. Ultimately, self-love doesn't always mean saying no out loud, but also gently whispering enough in silence. By learning to let go quietly and without resentment, you'll find a freedom that's indescribable. So when you encounter someone who seems to take more from you than they give, remember that you have the right and responsibility to choose who you let into your life and who you let go. And it's not about cruelty, it's about building a life full of people, experiences and moments that truly nurture you and allow you to grow. Because in the end, some people are like the wind. You feel them, enjoy them for a time, but you can never hold on to them. You simply have to let them pass. 3. It's curious how small habits sneak into our lives almost without us noticing. They're those automatic gestures, those subtle actions that seem harmless but can, over time, become destructive. Imagine it, a tiny drop falling on a rock day after day. At first it doesn't seem like much, but over time, that constant drip wears down even the hardest stone. What if those drops were our daily habits? How much damage could they do, and how could we stop them before they completely erode our peace? We've all been there. We wake up, grab our phone before our mind is fully awake, and plunge into an endless stream of notifications and social media. 10 minutes turn into 20, and before we know it, we've lost a good part of our morning without really starting our day. Or maybe it's that second coffee we don't really need, but use as an excuse for a break. Or that series we keep watching out of habit, even though it no longer brings us anything but wasted time. These are small acts, seemingly insignificant, but added together, they end up absorbing our energy and our mental peace. Recognizing these habits is the first step, and that's where one of the biggest challenges lies. Because while it's easy to point out what we don't like about others, being honest with ourselves and acknowledging our own self-destructive actions is a different story. As Socrates said, know thyself. In the end, we can't change what we're not even able to see clearly. When the Stoics reflected on how to improve life, they didn't talk about grand, heroic gestures or big, showy promises. Rather, they focused on the small, the imperceptible, those changes so quiet that only the one practicing them is aware. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic masters, taught us that true change doesn't make noise. It just happens. You don't need to announce to the world that you've decided to change. Transformation, if it's real, occurs silently and without the need for display. Imagine that you decide just for today to observe yourself. You wake up and notice how almost unconsciously your hand reaches for your phone. But this time, instead of following the impulse, you pause for a moment. You take a deep breath, feel the calm of the morning, and decide that today you won't start the day immersed in notifications. That small act of resistance, that conscious pause, is the first step toward a new routine. You don't need to throw your phone out the window, though it might be tempting. You just need to make a different choice. The same principle applies to other habits that seem insignificant, but accumulated, profoundly affect us. Maybe it's that third cup of coffee you drink just out of habit, or the unnecessary chat with someone who doesn't bring anything positive into your life. What if, instead of continuing on autopilot, you decide to pause? Ask yourself if you really need that third cup, or if you're just acting out of habit. If the answer is no, put the cup down and move on. It's not a monumental act, it's a small adjustment, a quiet change that, over time, adds up. These changes, though small, require something we often overlook: consistency. It's easy to promise that tomorrow we'll start a new routine, or that we'll leave behind those little habits that we know aren't leading us anywhere. But the real challenge is sticking to that decision day after day, even when progress seems insignificant. It's like planting a seed in the ground. You don't see anything at first, and it may take a long time before any sprouts appear. But if you keep watering it, if you nurture that seed with patience, one day it will surprise you with a tree that grew in silence. This process of personal change isn't about perfection. We all have our own internal battles, and that's okay. It's about recognizing that we can be gentle with ourselves as we move forward, that the goal isn't to eliminate all errors or flaws in one stroke, but to work on them calmly with a quiet perseverance. And if, at some point, you fall into the habit you wanted to avoid, don't punish yourself. Just try again the next day. True strength lies in consistency, in the daily effort. The next time you face one of those destructive habits, think about the Stoic strategy. Small steps and silence. You don't need to make a public declaration or start a crusade against your own actions. You just need to observe yourself, accept what you want to change, and act accordingly, one step at a time. With each choice you make in favor of your well-being, you are building a stronger, more serene version of yourself, one drop at a time, until one day you realize that the habit that once wore you down has disappeared. Inner peace and strength are built in silence. When you eliminate a habit that takes more than it gives, you're not just transforming your routine, you're building a life that respects your own well-being. Remember this: you don't need grand gestures, only constant awareness and the daily decision to care for yourself in every little detail. Like a river that gently smooths the stones it flows over, each small change transforms you until one day, without even noticing, you find yourself living with a peace that once seemed unattainable. 4. Have you ever caught yourself thinking that if you don't control every aspect of your life, the world will fall apart? Sometimes, we feel like we need to have every detail under our command to prevent anything from slipping out of place. We plan every aspect, anticipate problems, and imagine solutions. We convince ourselves that if we prevent everything, we'll achieve perfect balance. But life rarely works that way, does it? The truth is, the more we try to control, the more we feel like we're losing balance. It's a natural impulse. It gives us a sense of security, the illusion that if we just adjust the pieces a little more, the clock will work exactly as we want it to. But that need for control can actually become a prison we build, brick by brick. And when something doesn't go as expected, we feel trapped, frustrated, and sometimes even betrayed. As Stoic philosophy explains well, it's not about controlling every aspect of life, but about learning to let go and focus on what truly depends on us. Imagine this. You walk through life with a backpack, and every time you try to control something beyond your reach, you add another stone. At first, that load may not feel heavy. You might even think it's manageable. But over time, the backpack becomes heavier to the point where it starts to drain your energy and stops you from enjoying the moment. Why not empty that backpack and make room for what truly matters? Those stones of control are filling your life with unnecessary weight, while the truly important things fade into the background. The Stoics, who faced immense challenges in their time, also felt the impulse to control everything. However, they were pioneers in understanding that trying to stop the tide with your hands is absurd. Epictetus, one of the great Stoic philosophers, reminded us that we can only act on what is within our control, our emotions, our actions, our decisions. The rest, whether we like it or not, is beyond our hands. And every time we try to control the uncontrollable, we end up frustrated, hitting a wall we can't break down. You might wonder, how do I stop needing that control? Well, it's a daily practice. Imagine that little by little, you start to let go. Every time you face a situation that's out of your control, visualize the idea of letting go, like dropping a heavy stone into a river. It's not easy at first, but with each small act, you train yourself to trust the flow of life. Because sometimes, true control lies in accepting that you can't control everything. For some, the idea of letting go might sound passive, but it's actually quite the opposite. Letting go isn't surrendering. It's recognizing that you don't have to bear the weight of the world on your shoulders. When you obsess over anticipating every detail, you can end up submerged in constant anxiety. That was my case. If I had a meeting, I'd anticipate every possible comment or uncomfortable question. Or if I planned an outing with friends, I'd already be thinking about what could go wrong, as if that would prevent any mishaps. But life has a way of reminding us that no matter how much we plan, there will always be something we can't predict. One day, I decided to try something different, to let go of control little by little. I realized that even though things didn't always turn out as I expected, the load was much lighter when I stopped obsessing over a perfect outcome. It was a process of trust, a decision to allow life to happen without trying to anticipate everything. And to my surprise, I found that this freedom made me feel much more at peace. Sometimes things went well, other times not so much, but I no longer felt the constant tension of trying to foresee everything. Stoicism teaches us a powerful lesson, learning to trust the process. As Marcus Aurelius, one of the Stoic emperors and philosophers, said, "True strength lies in the ability to let go of the uncontrollable." This doesn't mean we should be indifferent. On the contrary, it means acting with purpose and dedication in what truly depends on us. By letting go of what's out of our hands, we make room for what truly matters: our decisions, our attitude, and how we face the situations we can influence. You could start today with a simple exercise. Observe some area of your life where you feel a strong need for control. Maybe it's your job, where you want everything to go as planned. Or it might be in your personal relationships, where you expect others to always respond the way you want. Take that desire for control and just for a moment, let it go. Make a conscious effort to accept the possibility that things might not go as you expect. This doesn't make you any less responsible. On the contrary, it allows you to enjoy the journey without the constant pressure of anticipating everything. The key lies in finding a balance between our expectations and reality. Because at the end of the day, no matter how much we try to avoid it, life will always have surprises, and some of them will be beyond our control. True maturity lies in accepting that reality, in letting life flow while we, from our place, make conscious and firm decisions in what we can change. By letting go of that unnecessary weight, we make room to live with more peace and freedom. Accepting uncertainty and letting go of control is, paradoxically, a powerful way to regain balance. Because when we stop trying to hold the reins of everything, we discover that we can actually live a fuller life in harmony with who we are. So when you feel the need to control every aspect of your life, remember that letting go may be the most liberating and strongest act you can make. 5. Have you ever felt the weight of an expectation that wasn't even yours? Maybe it wasn't asked of you directly, but it was there, hidden in approving glances or well-meaning comments. We grow up in a world where meeting certain expectations becomes almost unconsciously a way to measure our worth. It's a silent but powerful burden that shapes our perception of success and binds us to standards that, in most cases, we didn't even choose. We live thinking that fulfilling others' expectations and our own, which are sometimes even harsher, is synonymous with success. But is that really true? If we stop to think about it, we realize that trying to fill these unrealistic expectations is like trying to fill a bottomless well with a leaky bucket. We never finish, and all we're left with is frustration. What's interesting is that many of these expectations aren't even ours. They're a reflection of what others have imposed on us, family, friends, society, and we accept them without questioning, as if our life depended on it. Imagine you're in a race carrying a backpack. Every expectation you don't meet turns into a stone you add to it. At first, the weight is manageable, but over time, the backpack becomes so heavy that it exhausts you. You feel like you're dragging your feet, not enjoying the journey, with a constant sense of falling short. The question is, what good is reaching the finish line if the price is giving up your peace of mind? This is where Stoic philosophy offers a liberating perspective. The Stoics teach us that we can't control others' opinions or guarantee that circumstances will always be in our favor. The only thing we can truly control is how we react to what happens. In this sense, the real key isn't in trying to please everyone or reach a perfect ideal, but in freeing ourselves from that weight and focusing on our own actions and thoughts. To start letting go of these suffocating expectations, a good first step is to reflect on their origin. How many times have you tried to meet something you didn't really want? Maybe you worked on a project or followed a career path because it was the right thing, according to someone else's standards, without stopping to think if it was what you really wanted. It's time for an honest self-assessment. If your life were a closet full of clothes, now would be the time to examine each piece, each expectation. Which ones truly belong to you? And which are you carrying for others? To remove those external expectations, start with those that don't bring you any positive value. Imagine you're in a dark room, and each expectation you let go of is like turning on a small light. With each should you decide to let go, the room lights up, allowing you to see the space you've gained to move freely. It's not easy. Letting go can feel uncomfortable at first. But think of this as an act of self-care, freeing mental space for the things that truly matter to you and help you grow. The Stoics offer practical tools for letting go of expectations. One of them is changing the way we speak to ourselves. Instead of saying, "I have to do it perfectly," try saying, "I'll do the best I can with what I have now." This simple shift in words is liberating because it gives you room to make mistakes without feeling like the world is falling apart. It also opens the door to improvement without the constant pressure to be perfect. Additionally, lowering our expectations doesn't mean giving up our goals. On the contrary, it allows us to be more realistic and focus our efforts on what we truly want to achieve. A practical tip to accomplish this is not to share all your plans with everyone. When you keep your dreams and goals quiet, you avoid external noise and the pressure of having to meet others' expectations. It's like working in secret on something valuable and personal, giving yourself the freedom to progress at your own pace without feeling you owe anyone an explanation. It's important to remember that letting go of expectations doesn't mean resigning or being complacent. It's actually an act of wisdom and maturity. When you free yourself from those invisible chains, you start moving forward without extra weight. You focus on what you truly want and what you can realistically control. This process leads you to true freedom because you stop living under the shadow of what others expect from you. Marcus Aurelius said, "The happiness of your life depends on the quality of your thoughts." And by letting go of unrealistic expectations, your thoughts are no longer contaminated by anxiety and pressure, allowing them to flow naturally. Finally, try envisioning a lighter future. Picture yourself living without the constant pressure to meet others' standards. Imagine how your life would be if you let go of the need to be perfect, to meet every expectation. It's not about giving up on your dreams, but walking lighter. Like going on a trip with only the essentials, that's how it feels to live without the weight of unrealistic expectations. The less you expect, the lighter you become. This is an act of self-love, a way of telling yourself that you don't have to meet every demand to be enough. Life, after all, isn't about being perfect or fulfilling every expectation. It's about being present, enjoying the journey, and accepting that true peace and happiness lie in stopping the chase for perfection. 6. Have you ever felt that almost automatic need to prove you're right? as if the value of your words depended on everyone agreeing with you. It's as though every conversation turns into a silent duel, a battle where your victory depends on convincing others that you're correct. What's interesting is that many times, the war you're fighting isn't actually against others. It's with yourself. You strive to win arguments, to have the last word, as if your self-esteem depended on each small victory. And you know what? I get it. We're taught from a young age to avoid mistakes, to fear failure, as if being wrong were an unforgivable flaw. But let me tell you something. Sometimes, insisting on being right is exhausting and unnecessary. We live in a world that constantly pushes us to prove our knowledge and skills, where every mistake seems like an irreparable stumble and every success a step toward external approval that in the end has little value. Stoic philosophy has a lot to say on this subject. For centuries, Stoics have reminded us of something essential. We can't control how others perceive us or external circumstances. We can try to influence them, yes, but we can't always determine the outcome. So, is it worth wearing ourselves out trying to win every argument? What do we actually gain by always imposing our opinion? Perhaps a momentary satisfaction, but often that feeling fades as quickly as it came, leaving us with the same unease, the same need to seek out a new victory. It's like carrying a suitcase full of rocks. Every argument won adds another rock, and over time, that burden becomes almost unbearable. Have you ever felt exhausted without knowing exactly why? That pressure you feel might be the weight of so many unnecessary battles. You're wearing yourself out over something that deep down doesn't bring any real value. What if I told you that you can let go of that weight, that you don't actually need to prove you're right all the time? The next time you feel the urge to jump in and correct someone, try staying silent. It's not an act of resignation, it's an act of liberation. It's like letting go of a pen you've been gripping for hours without realizing it. When you let go, you feel a kind of relief, a peace you didn't know you needed. The need to be right works the same way. When you stop holding on to it, you discover that true satisfaction comes from tranquility, not from winning. The first step to releasing this burden is to accept that you don't always have to be the wisest or the one who always gets it right. Making mistakes is not only normal but necessary. It helps us grow, understand, and see things from new perspectives. In fact, some of the best lessons come from moments when we admit we don't know or don't have the answer. The philosopher Epictetus said, "It is impossible for a man to learn what he thinks he already knows." When we cling to the need to be right, we close the door to new learning opportunities. Another essential step is learning to listen, not to find gaps in the other person's argument to counter, but to listen with the intention of truly understanding their point of view. There's a big difference between hearing and listening. The former is mechanical, while the latter is a skill that few practice. When you really listen, you realize that many times you don't need to correct or impose yourself. You can simply let ideas flow, and you may even find something valuable in others' words. Finally, it's important to learn to enjoy silences, those moments when you don't have to say anything. Not every pause needs to be filled with words, and not every opinion needs correcting. Sometimes, the greatest act of wisdom is knowing when not to intervene. In many cases, letting others have the last word is not a defeat, but a quiet victory for your peace of mind. Because in the end, life isn't about accumulating victories in debates or being the smartest in the room. It's about finding serenity, moving forward without carrying the weight of a suitcase full of "I won this argument." Think of a conversation as a dance. You don't always have to lead the rhythm or guide each step. Sometimes just letting yourself be carried and enjoying the moment is far more valuable than imposing your way. Stoicism invites us to live lightly, to let go of the need to always be right. True wisdom lies in recognizing that our worth doesn't depend on having all the answers, but on being at peace with our own uncertainties. As Seneca said, it is not wise to always be right, but to know when to remain silent. Letting go of the need to impose is an act of humility and ultimately of self-love. The next time you find yourself in the middle of a discussion and feel that urge to prove you know more, take a deep breath, relax, and allow things to simply take their course. Imagine you're dropping a stone, letting go of a weight you didn't even need to carry. Suddenly, you'll find that the peace you feel afterward is far more satisfying than any small victory. In your next conversation, try something new. Instead of insisting on your point, allow yourself to listen and be curious. Stoic wisdom teaches us that winning every battle isn't necessary to live a fulfilling life, and in that simple act of letting go, you find a space of peace that frees you, because, as the Stoics well knew, true victory isn't in convincing the world, but in finding peace within yourself. 7. Have you ever felt like your life is trapped in a kind of constant background noise? And I'm not talking about car sounds or city buzz, but that subtle, persistent noise that lives in your pocket, on the screen in front of you, in every notification and alert that pops up. It's digital noise, a never-ending stream of messages, updates, and alerts that, without realizing it, ensnares you in a web of distractions. You tell yourself you're in control, that you can stop whenever you want, but in reality, it's the digital chaos that has control over you. We live in an era where silence has become a luxury. It's strange to think that something as natural as silence has become so rare. Yet it's not unreachable. Achieving a bit of digital peace is not an impossible dream. The first thing you need to do is identify what is really stealing your attention, which elements you can silently remove to reclaim your calm. In fact, the ancient Stoics had a remarkable clarity about the importance of inner peace. They knew they couldn't control the world around them, but they could control how they responded to it. Today, our battle isn't against external invaders, but against constant digital interruptions. And to fight this battle, you need to be radical. Carefully select what you allow into your mental space and be mindful of what you can let go. Social media, less is more. Let's start with the obvious: social media. We love to know what others are doing, but do you really need to follow every little update? We live in an age where more is better, but in the digital world, less is actually more. Imagine you're at a big party, surrounded by people all talking at once. Every profile you follow, every account you like, is another voice in that sea of conversations. The more you follow, the more noise you create. Do you really need to keep up with what a friend of a friend did on their last getaway? Probably not. I invite you to do a digital cleanse. Review your social media like you'd go through your wardrobe in spring. Get rid of what no longer brings value, just as you'd part with a piece of clothing that no longer fits. Let go of those accounts, those stories that add nothing to your life. This is the first step toward a clearer mental space. You'll find that when you remove unnecessary noise, you're left with what's essential, with what you actually want to see. Notifications break the cycle of interruptions. Have you ever felt the urge to check your phone every time it vibrates or makes a sound? Every notification is like a little call for attention, an interruption that steals your focus and distracts you from the moment. Our brain, always on the lookout for something new, reacts with a small dopamine rush every time a notification sounds, feeding a cycle of distraction and reward. But do you really need all those alerts? I suggest a small experiment. Turn off notifications that aren't essential. Allow only the important ones to reach you, and check the rest when you decide. At first, you may feel some anxiety, that sense of missing out on something important. But over time, you'll notice a renewed peace and control over your moments. It's an incredible relief to know that you're not a slave to alerts, that you decide when and how to connect. FOMO, the fear of missing out. One of the biggest modern villains is FOMO, the fear of missing out. We live with the feeling that if we're not connected, we'll miss out on something crucial, something everyone will see but us. But here's the paradox. The more we try to grasp everything, the more we miss what truly matters. It's like trying to fill a bottle with water while the tap is fully open. The water spills because it simply can't fit. So here's an uncomfortable truth. What truly matters isn't on the screen. It's around you, in the people and moments that go unnoticed because you're focused on the latest meme or news. Letting go of the fear of missing out is the first step toward rediscovering the value of what's right in front of you. Accept that you don't need to be everywhere, that you don't need to know everything. This is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself in the digital age. The power of digital silence. Once you free yourself from unnecessary noise, something magical begins to happen. You start listening, but this time not to notifications or alerts, but to yourself. Digital silence is like a whisper, inviting you to reconnect with your thoughts, your dreams, your goals. It's a space to discover what truly matters to you, what you want in your life. And here is where Stoic philosophy comes into play, reminding us that we cannot control the outside world, but can control our response to it. When you eliminate digital noise, what remains is a clearer mind, a renewed focus, and an inner peace that no external force can disturb. The Stoic Epictetus said, "It is not events that disturb us, but our interpretation of them." In the digital age, we could adapt this to say, it's not the digital chaos that disturbs us, but our dependency on it. When you choose silence, you choose to listen to yourself, to make room for what truly matters. So here's my advice. Adopt silence as a conscious choice, not as an absence of noise, but as a presence of what you truly want in your life. Digital silence allows you to live more deliberately, without the pressure of being constantly connected, and ultimately it reminds you of something fundamental, that inner peace is a luxury, but also a choice within your reach. As Gandhi said, peace is not the absence of noise, but the presence of serenity in the soul. In an age where digital noise is the norm, you have the power to turn it off and reconnect with yourself. So the next time you're tempted to check your phone for the 10th time in an hour, take a breath, pause, and remember that the real luxury is having the tranquility to be present in the here and now. 8. Have you ever felt that suddenly those dark, heavy thoughts take over your mind, almost without you noticing? They're like unwanted guests who show up uninvited and settle in as if they've always been a part of your life. They whisper things like, "Why does nothing go right for me?" or "I'll never be able to achieve this." And gradually, without realizing it, you hand them the keys to your mind, not because you want to, but because they convince you that their presence is inevitable. But what if I told you that you can change the lock? Think of these negative thoughts as weeds in a garden. They're just mental patterns that, if left unchecked, end up taking root and affecting everything you do. One day, you might find yourself sabotaging your own efforts or doubting your abilities because deep down, you've started to believe those stories your mind has invented. It's like planting a poisoned tree and then wondering why its fruits are bitter. Distortion of reality. Negative thoughts have a curious quality. Even if they're not true, they feel real, as solid as the ground beneath your feet. But the truth is that they are interpretations of reality, not reality itself. Here's where Stoic philosophy offers us a powerful tool. The Stoics believed that while we can't control what happens around us, we can control how we interpret those events and how we respond to them. And this is a lesson we often struggle to learn. Real freedom lies in taking charge of our responses, in consciously deciding how we want to react. Imagine you're in the middle of a storm, surrounded by dark clouds of doubts and fears. The key is to remember that you are the sky, and the clouds are only passing by. You are not your thoughts. They come and go like the weather while you remain the same. Of course, this shift in perspective doesn't happen overnight. It's a process that requires patience, practice, and above all, awareness. The power of mental silence. The first step to freeing yourself from these thoughts is silence. Yes, internal silence, that stillness that needs no drama or grand declarations. It's not about fighting your thoughts or trying to force them to disappear, but rather learning to observe them without reacting. Like a fly in the room, if you focus on catching it, it'll just buzz around more. Instead, if you ignore it, it will eventually disappear. Each time a negative thought appears, instead of fighting it or resisting it, acknowledge its presence and let it pass, like a leaf falling on water and floating downstream. The more attention you give it, the more power it has, so why not just try observing it? This is the first step to clearing mental noise without making a fuss. The technique of questioning, is it true? Another powerful tool for facing negative thoughts is to question them. Every time you feel a dark thought consuming you, ask yourself, is this really true? Often you'll find that these thoughts are nothing more than exaggerations or generalizations. Maybe you're telling yourself, everything goes wrong for me. But if you really analyze it, you'll see that it's not true. Is everything really going wrong? Or are you just focusing on the negative aspects? When you ask yourself questions, you create a space between yourself and your thoughts. That space is where you can see things with clarity and perspective. It's not about rejecting reality or ignoring problems, but seeing things as they are, without the filters of negativity that often distort reality. The next time a negative thought attacks you, ask yourself, is this true? Or, is it as bad as it seems? Over time, you'll discover that most of these thoughts are just inflated ideas without a solid foundation. Emotional detachment. Learn to see your thoughts as passing clouds. This is where detachment comes into play. And no, we're not talking about becoming a monk on top of a mountain, but about starting to emotionally distance yourself from what you think. This is one of the basic principles of Stoic philosophy. Your thoughts are not you, and just because something crosses your mind doesn't mean it has to stay there. Consider your thoughts as clouds in the sky. You're not responsible for those clouds appearing, and you don't have to control them. You can watch them pass by without attaching yourself to them or letting them affect your day. This takes practice, of course, but over time, you'll learn to see your thoughts for what they really are. Temporary ideas that don't necessarily represent reality. Transforming thoughts. Change the narrative. One of the most effective techniques for dealing with negative thoughts is to change the narrative. When you find yourself thinking, I'll never achieve this, try rephrasing it positively. This is a challenge, but I'm learning and improving every day. It's not about fooling yourself or being unrealistically optimistic, but about transforming your internal dialogue into one that supports you instead of sabotaging you. Does Brian Tracy's phrase sound familiar? Thoughts are not facts, but if you believe them, they become your reality. In the end, what you think shapes how you act, and how you act defines who you are. Change the narrative, and you'll see how your perception of reality changes too. Imagine that you have a narrator in your head. You can let it narrate your failures and doubts, or you can make it narrate your achievements and lessons. Inner peace as the ultimate goal. At the end of the day, negative thoughts are small things you can learn to quietly remove from your life. You don't need a big scene or an announcement. You only need a change of focus, a little patience, and some introspection. Remember that you have the power to decide which thoughts deserve your energy and which are simply passing clouds. Stoic philosophy reminds us of a profound truth. Peace doesn't come when the noise disappears, but when you learn to find serenity amid that noise. You have the power to create a space of tranquility in your mind where your thoughts are not your masters, but merely visitors. So, the next time you find yourself caught in a spiral of negativity, take a breath and remember, you have the key to change the lock. You don't need big changes or complicated solutions, just a conscious decision to focus on what you truly want in your life and let go of what doesn't bring you value. 9. Have you ever woken up and felt the world weighing a little heavier on you than usual? You look around and notice that this weight isn't just emotional. There's a pile of accumulated stuff, stacks of papers, clothes scattered everywhere, and somehow your mind also feels like a cluttered drawer. This feeling, which might seem trivial, actually reflects a deeper connection between physical clutter and mental chaos. At the end of the day, the environment around us can significantly influence our mental clarity and how we feel. Clutter, a mirror of our mind. Clutter isn't just a visual nuisance, it's a symbol of what's going on inside. Every object out of place, every paper that should have been recycled months ago, becomes a constant noise that distracts and overwhelms us. When we look at our surroundings, it's easy to feel that all that clutter drains our energy and clarity. The Stoics, for example, emphasized focusing on the essential and eliminating the superfluous from our lives. It's a principle that resonates deeply, as clutter, by definition, is everything unnecessary that pulls us away from our center and distracts us from what truly matters. The accumulation of objects doesn't just occupy physical space, it also generates an emotional burden. Every time you see a messy corner, it reminds you of small pending tasks that stir up anxiety. It's like an invisible weight we carry with us, even when we aren't aware of it. Have you ever found yourself in that situation, feeling overwhelmed by the idea of tidying up, but not knowing where to start? That's when the mind feels like a maze. Every corner you turn seems to reveal even more clutter. Observe and acknowledge. The key to starting to clear both physical and mental clutter is observation. Take a moment to look around and ask yourself, do I really need all this? This simple question can be a powerful starting point. If you haven't used something in a long time, you probably don't need it. But it's not just about removing material objects. Mental clutter works similarly. How often do we hold on to resentments, worries, or negative thoughts like broken objects, convinced that they might be useful someday? The reality is that carrying that weight only anchors us. So what's the next step? The answer lies in silent elimination. This process doesn't need to be a spectacle. You don't have to announce it to the world, just start letting go. This act of releasing what no longer serves you is an act of self-love. It's like tending to a garden. Sometimes the healthiest choice is to get rid of the weeds so that the flowers can bloom freely. Letting go without drama. Imagine that you're clearing out everything you no longer need, both from your physical space and your mind. It can be liberating. Sometimes silence is the most revolutionary act in a world full of noise. If there are thoughts that drain you, if you find yourself trapped in cycles of worry, allow yourself to let go of them. No drama, no long explanations, just let them go. Every object you choose to release is one more step towards a lighter, clearer life. As the Stoics said, it's essential to focus on what truly matters. Keeping what isn't essential only distracts us and pulls us away from our purpose. Outer order often translates into inner order. If you start clearing your surroundings, you'll notice that little by little, that mental clarity will also start to emerge. It's a gradual process, but it's worth it. Sometimes organizing just one drawer can make you feel lighter, as if a burden has been lifted. The impact of an organized space. When you finally decide to clean and organize your environment, you can feel your mind starting to clear up too. Every object you put in its place, every paper you recycle, is one less weight. Imagine your mind as a cluttered room. When you begin to clean, light can enter and everything feels more open. Clarity begins to emerge, and with it, a greater capacity to focus on what really matters. Think of someone who has decided to get rid of things they no longer use. At first, it might seem like a monumental task, but once they start, they discover that each item they let go of gives them a sense of freedom. Suddenly their home is not just a place where they live, but a refuge where they can think, create, and most importantly, find peace. The connection between mind and space. Stoic philosophy teaches us that outer order can reflect inner order. If you want to achieve lasting mental peace, start by organizing what surrounds you. Do it without haste, without noise. The change can be gradual, but every small step counts. Over time, you'll notice that your mind feels clearer and that you can focus on the things that truly matter. Just like a maze becomes more accessible as paths are cleared, your mind can also find a way out of emotional chaos. Living in a world filled with physical and mental clutter can feel like navigating a stormy sea. But when you start letting go of what you don't need, you begin to see that calm was always there. You just needed to clear the horizon to see it. In the end, clutter isn't just a matter of aesthetics, it's a reflection of how we manage our lives and emotions. As Nelson Mandela said, when the noise stops, the essential can be heard more clearly. This phrase holds a profound truth. When we remove the noise of clutter, we can hear what really matters. Eliminate in silence, but consistently. Each time you decide to get rid of something that no longer serves you, be it a physical object or a negative thought, you're taking a step toward a fuller, lighter life. Remember, your mind will thank you. In a world of constant distractions, finding the path to order might be one of the best decisions you make for your mental and emotional well-being. So, where will you start today? 10. Have you ever found yourself in a situation where, while browsing social media or simply chatting with friends, you start comparing your life to others? It's almost as if your mind enters an invisible race, feeling like you have to run faster, reach higher, and do more just to keep up. But stop for a moment and think, does it really make sense? In this race, the curious thing is that the other competitors don't even know they're in it, and chances are they don't care at all. The trap of comparison. Imagine you're in a talent show, trying to impress a panel that has no idea you're even a contestant. Instead of showcasing your own voice, you try to sing like someone else. Does that sound absurd? That's exactly what happens when you compare yourself to others. Each of us has our own melody, our own rhythm. And when we insist on following someone else's sheet music, we stray from our authentic essence. This habit of comparing ourselves, which at first glance may seem harmless, often acts as a silent thief, undermining our self-esteem. One day, you wake up feeling that you're not good enough, fast enough, or talented enough, all because you've been too focused on what others are achieving instead of looking forward and celebrating your own milestones. Life isn't a sprint, it's more like a voyage. Each of us is the captain of our own ship. You decide the direction, the stops, and the pace. But if you're obsessed with the boat next to you, all you'll achieve is veering off your own course. And the irony is, while you're looking at someone else's boat, that person is probably glancing over at you, wondering why they don't have the same wind in their sails. Everyone's watching each other, but few are actually enjoying their own journey. The first step, quiet comparison. So what can you do to free yourself from this trap of comparison? Here's a simple exercise. Stop comparing yourself in silence. Do it like those things you remove from your life without making noise, like when you decide to get rid of an old t-shirt you no longer wear. No one needs to know you're doing it, but you'll feel the difference. Comparing yourself to others is not only useless, it's also a betrayal of yourself. It's like telling your inner self that you're not enough, that you need to be like someone else to have value. Yet this philosophy makes no sense. The Stoics teach us that the only valid comparison is with ourselves. How were you yesterday? Question the voice of comparison. When that little internal voice begins to compare you to others, instead of trying to silence it, listen to it. Question its logic. Ask yourself, why are you comparing yourself to that particular person? What makes you feel inferior? Recognizing these thoughts can be the first step toward dismantling their power over you. Then, take a moment to reflect on your own achievements and progress, however small. It's surprising how easy it is to forget what we've accomplished when we're too busy looking at others. This is where gratitude comes into play. Yes, it might sound like a cliché, but don't underestimate its power. When you start being grateful for what you have and what you've achieved, instead of focusing on what you lack or what others have, you experience a noticeable shift in perspective. That burden of comparison begins to fade. You realize that the only path that truly matters is yours, and it's unique and unrepeatable. The journey to your own authenticity. Imagine for a moment that each step you take in life is a note in the symphony of your existence. Every success, every challenge overcome, every lesson learned adds to that unique composition that is you. When you stop distracting yourself with others' music, you can start listening to your own melody and, most importantly, enjoy it. Life is too short to waste time competing in an imaginary race. Living your life at your own pace, following your own rules, is where you truly find freedom. It's as if an immense weight is lifted off your shoulders. When you start doing this, you discover how freeing it is. You no longer feel the need to compare, and instead, you can focus on what truly makes you happy. I'll share a thought that helped me a lot during my hardest times. When you stop seeing yourself through others' eyes, you discover who you truly are. Each of us has a unique path, full of twists and surprises. And if we choose to walk that path without looking back, we begin to live authentically. If you've made it this far, I invite you to share your experiences in the comments. Reflect on what you've learned and how you've freed yourself from comparison. Sometimes, in silence, we find the answers we've been looking for. I'm excited to hear about your success stories. Before we say goodbye, I encourage you to subscribe, turn on notifications, and leave a comment. Your support is essential for us to keep creating content that inspires and helps you. I also suggest you check out our latest videos. You'll surely find something that resonates with you. I sincerely thank you for your time and support. See you in the next adventure, where we'll continue exploring the beauty of being authentic in a world that often pushes us to be something we're not. See you soon.